Welcome to the program. 7 more dead dolphins have been discovered on a Mauritius beach a day after 17 carcasses washed up near an oil spill caused by a Japanese ship that struck a coral reef. The full impact of this spill is still unfolding, but scientists have warned to brace for a major ecological disaster in the area which could impact Mauritius and its tourism-dependent economy for decades.
Tu blanc, allez, tu as envie de lever. Allez, allez, une coup de main. Allez, levez par l'eau, levez par l'eau.
Well, there are calls for autopsy results to be made public after 17 dead dolphins washed up on the beach in Mauritius weeks after a major oil spill. Adam Reed with more details.
17 dead dolphins washed up on the shores of Mauritius on Wednesday, a government official said, weeks after an oil spill caused a major ecological disaster in the area. Jasvin Sok Apadu said the dolphins had several wounds and blood around their jaws, with no trace of oil, and that they'd been taken to a research centre for an autopsy. A spokesperson for local environmental group EcoSud called for the results of the autopsy to be released publicly. In late July, a Japanese bulk carrier ran aground off the coast of the island and began spilling oil a week later. Scientists say the full impact is unfolding and the damage could affect and its tourism-dependent economy for decades.
Also, coup leaders in Mali have released ousted President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta from detention, a junta official said on Thursday. Adam Reed with more details.
The leaders of a military coup in Mali have told West African mediators that they want to stay in power for a 3-year transition period, Nigeria said on Wednesday. Negotiators from the Economic Community of West African states were sent to Mali at the weekend to discuss a return to civilian rule with the officers who ousted President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta over a week ago. But 3 days of meetings ended without agreement on the structure of a transitional government.
But there are some issues that we have not agreed.
On Wednesday, former Nigerian President Goodluck Jonathan, who led the ECOWAS delegation, gave an update to his successor, Muhammadu Buhari. In a statement, the presidency quoted Jonathan as saying the coup leaders wanted a 3-year transition, even though ECOWAS had told the junta that a maximum period of 1 year would be acceptable. ECOWAS has taken a hard line on the coup, shutting borders and halting some financial flows, amid fears the political turmoil could exacerbate insecurity in a region that is seeing rising Islamist militancy. The military leaders have said they want the sanctions lifted, as they were already affecting the population. ECOWAS leaders are scheduled to hold a summit on Friday to discuss further steps.
The military officers who ousted Mali's president, Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta, want 3 years before election, Nigeria said on Wednesday, even though West African mediators have said a maximum of a year would be acceptable. David Doyle with more details.
Ousted former Mali President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta was released on Thursday, said the group of leaders who've been keeping him captive for almost 2 weeks. Military officers have been in control of the West African country since detaining Keïta at gunpoint and forcing him to resign. The group, who called themselves the National Committee for the Salvation of the People, said he was freed and returned to his home, although his whereabouts could not immediately be confirmed. According to one local, his residence appeared to be deserted during Thursday, with no sign of the usual security presence. Keïta's release was one demand of Mali's international partners, including France and West African countries, who've taken a hard line over the coup and imposed sanctions. A delegation from West Africa's regional bloc met with the coup leaders last weekend in the capital, Bamako. The CNSP has since said they want to stay in power for a 3-year transition period, according to reports in Nigeria on Wednesday. In contrast, the regional bloc is seeking for a transitional government of no more than 1 year.
To Sudan now, and the floodwaters in Sudan have reached the highest levels on record, killing dozens, destroying thousands of homes and encroaching on some neighborhoods of the capital, Khartoum. Floodwaters have spilled over into major roads in Khartoum for the first time in living memory. The flooding comes despite Ethiopia starting to fill the reservoir behind a giant new dam upstream on the Blue Nile in July. The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam is expected to help Sudan control future floods. At least 122 people have died and 147 others injured, with scores still declared missing after torrential floods wreaked havoc in Afghanistan's 12 eastern provinces, according to the Office of State Minister for Disaster Management and Humanitarian Affairs. Some 85 people were killed and 110 others injured Tuesday night in the worst-hit Parwan province, where at least half of the provincial capital, Charikar, was affected by the floods. The flood has receded in most areas within the province, but roads remain impassable. U.S. President Donald Trump accepted the Republican nomination for a second term on Thursday with a scathing attack on rival Joe Biden, asserting that a Democratic victory in November would only exacerbate the racial strife and the coronavirus pandemic besieging the nation. Speaking from the White House South Lawn, despite criticism that he was using the executive residence as a political prop, Trump portrayed Biden, a career politician with a long record as a moderate and far-left extremist who would usher in a lawless and dangerous America.
And this election will decide whether we will defend the American way of life or whether we will allow a radical movement to completely dismantle and destroy it. That won't happen. At the Democrat National Convention, Joe Biden and his party repeatedly assailed America as a land of racial, economic, and social injustice. And I say very modestly that I have done more for the African-American community than any president since Abraham Lincoln, our first Republican president. When asked if he supports cutting police funding, Joe Biden replied, yes, absolutely. When Congresswoman Ilhan Omar called the Minneapolis Police Department a cancer that is rotten to the root, Biden wouldn't disavow her support and reject her endorsement. He proudly displayed it shortly later on his website. Displayed it in big letters. Make no mistake, if you give power to Joe Biden, the radical left will defund police departments all across America. They will pass federal legislation to reduce law enforcement nationwide. They will make every city look like Democrat-run Portland, Oregon. No one will be safe in Biden's America. My administration will always stand with the men and women of law enforcement.
While Democratic vice presidential candidate Kamala Harris on Thursday slammed President Donald Trump's response to the coronavirus pandemic, saying he was scared hours before Trump made a crucial pitch for his second term. Trump's keynote address at the Republican National Convention underscored his record in office and charted a path for the next 4 years.
Donald Trump has failed at the most basic and important job of a President of the United States. He failed to protect the American people. Plain and simple. Trump showed that we in the legal profession would call a reckless disregard for the well-being of the American people. A reckless disregard. He never appreciated that a president swears an oath before God and country to protect America against threats seen and unseen. It's his duty. And here's what you have to understand about the nature of a pandemic. It's relentless. You can't stop it with a tweet. You can't create a distraction and hope it'll go away. It doesn't go away. By its nature, a pandemic is unforgiving. If you get it wrong at the beginning, the consequences are catastrophic.
Well, anti-Trump demonstrators gathered outside the White House in Washington, D.C. on Thursday, blowing air horns and wielding whistles with hope their cacophony would be overheard during the nomination acceptance speech of U.S. President Donald Trump at the Republican National Convention. In a reminder of the country's divisions, attendees could hear the protesters sounding horns as he spoke, a noise that occasionally was audible in the live broadcast. In the course of this live broadcast, we'll be speaking live to VOA correspondent Brian Padden, live from Washington, D.C., to recap President Donald Trump's acceptance speech at the Republican National Convention on Thursday night. In other news, nearly 500 Burundian refugees who fled to neighboring Rwanda in 2015 following political unrest have begun returning home as diplomatic ties between the two East African countries warm up. The first group of 493 refugees left Mahama camp in eastern Rwanda early Thursday after being tested and confirmed to be negative for coronavirus. This follows a letter that was addressed to Burundi's government in mid-August asking for dignified repatriation. In their letter, the refugees expressed hope for security under President Ndayishimiye's rule following his promise during inauguration that there would be no retribution exerted upon political opponents.
We have 1,800 who registered, among them the 493 who have just crossed. The rest we shall see with the Burundi side. They had requested for 2 weeks to prepare. Today is the 2 weeks are okay. That's why you can see them crossing, and they had requested a maximum people of 500. Those are the people who have crossed. So the next batch of 500 can come after maybe 3 or 4 days.
Given that we have to do the COVID testing for all of them and have to wait for the result to know who is clear to travel, and it took us to work overnight to make this happen. We have accused some delay, but everything is perfectly under control.
The coronavirus pandemic serves as a reminder of the need to boost healthcare across Africa. An annual meeting of the World Health Organization has heard. Sisivo Squaia with more details. All right, we do apologize for that. We'll be bringing you that report in the course of this live broadcast. Let's move on now. And the World Health Organization spokeswoman says there is a slim possibility of people being reinfected with COVID-19, following reports in Hong Kong that a man had contracted a new coronavirus for a second time after an interval of more than 4 months. Speaking to journalists in Geneva, World Health Organization spokeswoman Margaret Harris noted the reinfection signaled on Monday was significant. According to the University of Hong Kong scientists who announced the development, the virus strains that infected the man more than 4 months apart were different.
We've had anecdotal reports every now and then of people who've tested negative then tested positive, and it hasn't been clear up until this case whether that was simply a problem with testing or whether people were getting infected a second time. But it's very important to understand what this means in terms of immunity, and this is why we have got a lot of research groups actually tracking people, measuring antibodies, trying to understand how long the immune protection lasts, the natural immune protection, and that should be understood as it is not the same as the immune protection that a vaccine provides.
The coronavirus pandemic serves as a reminder of the need to boost healthcare across Africa, as an annual meeting of the World Health Organization has had. Let's listen in to that report by CC4 Square.
As the World Health Organization reports that the COVID-19 outbreak appears to be slowing across Africa, health ministers and representatives from the continent's countries have stressed that the disease is a poignant reminder of the need to boost health systems. At the WHO's annual Regional Committee for Africa, Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed said Africa quickly felt the impact of the pandemic due to weak health systems and the highest disease burden in the world.
COVID-19 has taught us that strong health systems are a matter of national security and survival.
A WHO assessment has recommended a number of measures, including that governments find ways to increase public funding for healthcare. On Wednesday, the UN body also reported a 7% decrease in cases of the new coronavirus across the continent compared with the week before. While the decline is encouraging, it said the data should be treated cautiously, as it could be affected by a number of factors, including testing strategy and delays in reporting. Former virus hotspots seeing a fall in cases included South Africa, Ghana, Kenya, Gabon, Madagascar and Zambia, but the trend was not universal. The countries seeing the biggest increases, Uganda and Rwanda, with 184% and 137% rises respectively. In total, Africa has seen more than 1.2 million cases of COVID-19, with 930,000 recoveries and over 28,000 deaths.
Of Egypt's El Gouna, a luxurious beach resort by the Red Sea, say they too have been hit hard by the coronavirus crisis and are taking all necessary measures to jumpstart tourism, which has come to a near halt over the past few months. Suffering the biggest crisis in the past 50 years, Egypt's tourism industry is recovering slower than expected. Egypt closed its airports to international flights and shut famous historic sites in mid-March as the government looked to curb the spread of the virus. The government says that tourism accounts for 5% of economic output, but analysts say it may account for as much as 15% if jobs and investment indirectly related to the industry are included.
I think it's the biggest crisis tourism has seen in the last 50 years, much bigger than anything else that happened ever before. It's not only tourism, I mean, it's also, of course, airline business.
We have to learn to live with it. We have to have rules and regulations and standards and learn to live. And if we respect it and we know what it is, and there is a very simple rule. If you feel sick, stay home. That's it. And keep distance, wash your hands,